This is Doug DeMuro, and today we're going to talk about sequential manual transmissions. Top Gear used to call them flappy paddle gearboxes. Basically, the things that shift gears for you, but they're not traditional automatics with a torque converter. There's an automated clutch, but they're also not dual clutch automatics where they're incredibly smooth and fast. They're single clutch sequential manual transmissions, and it's kind of jerky, and you shift and it's like it's not perfected, let's just say. Well, sequential manuals, most people don't like them, but I've started to kind of appreciate them. And today, I'm going to explain why. Today's video is brought to you by Cars and Bids, my online enthusiast car auction site that recently sold this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Okay, so let's talk sequential manual transmission. The sequential manual transmission probably has been used for years in various obscure vehicles, but in the mainstream, it first showed up in the late 1990s. The first mass market, well-known car to offer it was more or less the Ferrari F355, beginning in 1998. And while an automatic transmission isn't new, and Ferrari had used regular torque converter automatics before, this was a different thing. Basically, a simplified explanation of how it works. An automatic transmission uses a torque converter for gear changes, and it's a relatively smooth and seamless process. But a sequential manual used a clutch, just like you would press with your foot like a manual transmission. It was just an automated clutch. Instead of your foot, there was an automated process happening behind. So you'd pull the paddle and it would engage a clutch and it would shift gears, but it was sort of slow and jerky. And at the time when these were popular, there were a lot of complaints about that. Now, the sequential manual was used from that period in the late 90s when Ferrari debuted it and a few other automakers quickly followed. It was used basically up until kind of 2010-ish when everybody started switching away from the sequential manual and onto a dual clutch. A DCT, that's what BMW called it, DSG, Volkswagen, PDK, Porsche, the dual clutch. So the sequential manual really only had that late 90s to kind of like 2010 window in which it existed. And in that era, even though it was only 12 years, most automakers actually did a pretty good job of refining their sequential manual transmissions to improve. So Ferrari had F1, that's what they called it. Lamborghini had E-Gear. Maserati had Cambio Corsa. BMW had SMG. Toyota had SMT in the MR2 Spider. Audi had R-Tronic in the R8. Interestingly, Porsche, of all the performance brands doing this, Porsche never went down this rabbit hole. I guess because they knew this tech was kind of inferior. It's slower, it's jerky, it wasn't as refined as it could be, and Porsche was all about refinement. So they didn't bother with a sequential manual, but yet everyone else did. Even though, it was slow, it was jerky, there were complaints about its operation, it was slower to operate, it was more expensive to use. It wasn't tremendously well received, and yet I've started to like it. Okay, so here's what happened. When these were new, I hated them. I worked at a Ferrari dealer in the summer of 2008, 2007, somewhere like that, when I was in college, and Ferrari of Denver. And at that time, all of the performance cars had these sequential paddle shift, sequential manuals, and I hated them. I had just learned how to drive a manual transmission. I loved the feel of shifting gears for the first time. And we had some very special manuals at the dealer at the time. There were two Porsches, a 993, still one of the best manuals of all time. And I loved driving those, and I hated these stupid sequential manual cars. But now, with the benefit of time and looking back on it, I'm actually starting to get into it. Now, I know all of the drawbacks. They are slow, they are jerky, they are expensive to own because they still have a clutch that needs to be replaced, and various parts can fail. But I'm starting to get into it because it's just mechanical. The feel of it is kind of cool. I absolutely love dual clutch cars, like so many other people do. They're tremendously fast. The shifts are absolutely immediate. They're so quick. But to be totally honest, it's a bit sanitized. A dual clutch, it's like too obvious. And of course, it's what I would want for daily driving because it's a quick shift and it's smooth. And it's what I would want for racetrack driving because it's fast and it's reliable and it can handle a lot of power and a lot of heat and usage. But it's very point and shoot. Like it's very like, I want to go fast, so I put my foot down and it shifts for me. You just go and it shifts fast and it's easy and it's a little sanitized and a little dull. Sequential manuals are not any of that, but they do have a feel. You feel the gears changing. You feel the transmission doing work. And in an age of electric cars with a very sanitized driving experience and all these other cars with their dual clutches or their very smooth torque converters with a similar feel, in my opinion, the feel of a car, the experience, the mechanical feel is becoming more important than the all-out speed that electric cars can provide. Everyone has speed these days, everyone. But not everyone has the mechanical clunk and the feel of a gear change. Now, to be clear, not everybody wants that, and I get it. Again, for a daily driver car, electric, sure, there's a million reasons to do that. Dual clutch, of course, same deal, a million reasons. They're quicker, they're more efficient, there's so many benefits. There's a lot of obvious benefits to those things, and I wouldn't say that everybody should just go buy a sequential manual car. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is the feel of it is actually kind of, to me, starting to hit me as maybe this is okay for a fun car, for a sidecar, the mechanical feel. And it's not just the mechanics, it also requires some effort to operate. To do it right, to shift correctly in a sequential manual car, you drive along, you pull the paddle, and then you actually have to back your foot off the accelerator to let the car change gears just like you would in a car with a manual transmission. Now, not everybody drives sequential manuals this way, but that is the right way to do it. And then once the gear changes happen, you can kind of feel it and hear it. You roll back onto the throttle and then you're in the next gear. And that's the way to have the quickest shift, and it's also the way to smooth out the shifting process and make it better. And to me, that has some of the driving feel of a true manual. Not only do you hear it and feel it, but you also actually have to do some driver input in order to make the best possible gear change. Now, to be clear, I've addressed mostly automatic transmissions in this video, but compared to a sequential manual, I obviously still greatly prefer a traditional manual transmission with 3 pedals, a clutch, a shift pattern, ideally a gated one. I still prefer a traditional manual transmission far and away over these sequential manual clunk boxes. But in some of these cases, a real manual is dramatically more expensive than the automatic counterpart. The Lamborghini Murcielago, you can buy an automatic Mercy for $200 all day long. Sticks can be $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. Ferrari can be 5 times the value. A 575 with a manual transmission can be a $400,000 car versus $100,000 for the automatic version. So although I would rather have a manual, in some cases, just the difference in pedals and a shift pattern is a 4x decision on price. And to me, the sequential manual doesn't compensate for the feel entirely, but I'm not entirely sure that it deserves to be 1/5 of the price just because you're pulling paddles instead of shifting gears. And so to me, you start to think, well, maybe for that level of a price delta, I would consider shifting paddles and feeling the mechanical feel of the car that way, rather than shifting my own gears and feeling it in a superior way, but it's just so much more expensive. And so my big surprise here over the last couple of years is that the sequential manual transmission is starting to grow on me. I'm actually starting to kind of enjoy the way it drives. And I'm astonished by this because I never, ever in a million years thought that this was going to happen. Again, I was driving these cars back when they were new, and I felt even then that they were just awful. For F1 paddle shift sequential manual, why not just do a true manual? It just feels so much better. I hated it. And I never thought I would grow to embrace it later. And I'm surprised that's exactly what happened. And sometimes now when I see a 575M or a 612 with those flappy paddles, and I think about the driving experience, you get a V12, I think to myself, yeah, I could probably live with that transmission. And frankly, I would even enjoy it, crazy though that might sound. Anyway, that's my take. That's my surprising take on sequential manual paddle shift cars. It surprises me, I'll tell you that. but that's how I feel. And you, of course, can feel free to tell me how wrong I am. I'm sure there will be lots of that, but don't be surprised if you too eventually come around. You're driving off PDK, dual clutch, DSG cars, you start thinking there's something missing here. And that something missing might just be a... It doesn't seem as bad as it once did, that mechanical feel, in an age where so many cars have left it behind.